Hello and welcome into another episode of 5 Rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We are talking combat sports for the next hour and 15 minutes. I am Alex Donno alongside the real Frank Zaffere and James Walker. Before I give our guys a proper introduction, let me give the proper introduction to our proud sponsor, the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. The Quarterdeck has been family to me for the last 10 years. They've been with me on my shows. The Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. Guys, make this your spot to watch every UFC pay-per-view fight with 0.0 cover charge. They will charge you nothing at the door to watch every UFC pay-per-view. They've got 2-for-1 happy hour that never ends. That's all day, every day. The seafood is delicious, guys. Right out of the ocean. I love the oysters, the Maine lobster. The sushi is to die for. You can build your own poke bowl at the Quarterdeck. I take advantage of that opportunity very frequently. The sandwiches are incredible. I recently tried the new jerk chicken sandwich, which is awesome, and it's very spicy. I'm a man's man, so I love spicy food. And I recently had the French dip sandwich, which is so good. I do like really spicy food. It's
the man's man.
That's not the first part. Yeah.
Oh man. So it's such delicious food, guys. Get on down to the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. If you want to check out the menu before you go or find the location nearest to you, visit them on the web, quarterdeckrestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. And this hour, as we started doing this last week, guys, be watching and listening for your chance to win. I've got this in my hand right here. This is a $20 Quarterdeck gift card. So how we do this, for those of you who were watching last week, you probably remember you have to be retaining the information that I'm going to give you in a couple of minutes. I'm going to give people a chance to get in because sometimes people get on a little bit late. We're South Floridians. So in a few minutes, I'm going to be giving out this hour a code word, okay? And you got to remember that code word because I'm going to give it to you in a few minutes. And then at some point between now and 7 o'clock, it could be 5 minutes from now. It could be 45 minutes from now. It could be right at 6:59 on the dot. I'm going to tell you guys, unleash the code word. And you write in that code word, and the first person to type it into the chat is going to win this $20 Quarterdeck gift card that I'm holding in my hand. So be listening in a few minutes for the code word. Write it down, and then later this hour, be ready to spew it back to us for a Quarterdeck gift card. But let me introduce my co-hosts on this episode. Guys, we're going to be recapping Paul versus Woodley. We're going to be recapping the battle of the two best kickers in the UFC, Chikadze over Barboza, and we're going to be looking ahead to Derek Brunson versus Darren Till this coming weekend. We are here as always with James Walker. Good evening, James. How are you?
I'm doing great. I think we got through the temporary dark part of the year with the Paul Woodley card. And now for the rest of the year, it's going to be nothing but fireworks, nothing but high-level fighting coming up, especially with some cards. I know we're going to talk about UFC 267 coming up, but there's going to be a lot of good fights coming up over these next 3 or 4 months that I'm excited about.
And, of course, the man, the myth, and the legend, Frank Zaffere, is here. Good evening, Frank. How are you, sir?
I'm great. And James, I hate to break it to you, but that Paul Woodley is just the start of an onslaught over the next few years of these kinds of fights.
Well, and it may not be the last time these two guys fight because they're talking about running it back. So Jake Paul ends up winning by split decision, and I guess he deserved it. Tyron Woodley let him off the hook. You come to notice that Tyron Woodley has the same problem as a boxer as he's had in recent years as an MMA fighter. This guy just doesn't commit enough to the kill, and he doesn't show up mentally. It was very obvious to me, gentlemen, that Tyron Woodley is the more dangerous puncher. I mean, he landed the more damaging blows, just didn't land enough of them. Superior athlete, and he should have won that fight. But I do agree that Jake Paul outworked him. And I just thought Tyron let MMA down. Tyron let himself down. Tyron let Dean Thomas down, who's going to be joining us in about 25 minutes. Dean is going to help us not only break that down, but break down everything going on in the UFC. And, they made that silly tattoo bet that Tyron, I don't know if he's gotten it yet, but he does claim he's going to actually pay up where he's got to get for losing the fight. I love Jake Paul. He's got to get that tattooed on his body. And Paul would have had to do the same for Tyron if he had lost the fight. And so they were talking afterwards, gentlemen. And Frank, I'll go to you first on this in a second. They were talking afterwards, and Tyron Woodley, of course, he's imagining how fat his bank account was about to get, because I think he got paid like a $2 million flat fee or something along those lines for that fight, which is more than he was making in the UFC. So, of course, then he's immediately calling out Jake for a rematch. I got to get a rematch. And Jake is like, oh, yeah, I'll give you a rematch only if you carry out the tattoo bet. If you get the ink, if you get I love Jake Paul tattooed on yourself, I will give you the rematch. Tyron says he's going to do it. So, Frank, are you interested whatsoever in watching these guys run it back and do it again? Because I hope that we've seen enough of this.
All right. No, I'm not. But it doesn't matter what I'm into because I'm old. And I wish Kevin Iole was coming on tonight because I want to rub this in his face too. The buys, the enthusiasm for this event, place was packed. I mean, you would have thought Floyd Mayweather was fighting Manny Pacquiao back in the day. I mean, it was the kind of boxing crowd that we haven't seen in a long time, back when boxing was still boxing and all of us were probably still consuming it as much as we consume MMA today. So, no, I don't want to see it again. But the people, the young people, the new generation of people coming up, they want to see it again. Absolutely, they want to see it again. And for Jake Paul, it's 100% the right decision because he'll beat Tyron again. And so that's another payday. He stays unblemished and his boxing thing keeps going because this little boxing house of cards he's built is completely premised on him being undefeated. So, as soon as he gets whipped, the next sensation, YouTube sensation or whatever sensation is going to have to come up and fill his void. So, it's the right move for him. Tyron, it's the right move for his bank account. I don't know what his money management skills are like, but it's the right way for him to go. So, yeah, it should happen again. I'm not going to watch it, but it should happen again.
Yeah, and I wasn't interested in it the first time, and I definitely won't be interested in it the second time. But just for starters, it wasn't a robbery either way. It was a split decision. You can make a case. If you're a numbers guy, you say, well, Jake Paul landed, more shots than Tyron Woodley. If you're a damage guy, and you say, okay, Tyron landed the more powerful punches, including a near knockdown in round 4. I believe that was kind of the turning point, the most exciting part of the fight. But Tyron didn't come out fast enough. He pretty much gave away the first 2 rounds. And in an 8-round fight, if you're not willing to, come out fast, you leave it to the judges. I mean, that kind of stuff is going to happen. This wasn't a 12-round fight, or anything like that. This was an 8-round fight, and Tyron pretty much didn't get going until the 3rd or 4th round, in this fight. So as far as the, decision, I actually think this is probably the best thing that could have happened to Tyron. And obviously he lost the fight, and he got to get the tattoo, but he can say he won, and there's a good percentage of the population that might believe that he won a pretty close fight. He definitely did the most damage, and he gets a rematch. So at the end of the day, he's going to get 2 huge purses, out of this, charade, so to speak. So yeah, I think this is actually a good thing for Tyron, even though he lost.
But Alex, can I jump in? I mean, the one thing about the whole thing about him being robbed, I mean, one of the great things about boxing is it's very easy to score, and they actually have computers that do it now. I mean, Paul, it should have been a unanimous decision.
Yeah,
I mean, and I thought the big mistake that Woodley made was headhunting, only power shotting. I mean, no jabs, which of course he didn't do in MMA either, really. But that was really the issue for him. And so if they run it back, hopefully, I mean, look, Paul's a boxer. He trains in boxing. So once again, we're getting illustrated. These are 2 different sports. You can't just wake up one morning and decide to spend a few weeks learning a new sport and then fight somebody who's been training at it for years and has a few pro fights.
Yeah, and I was actually watching a breakdown that Michael Bisping, of all people, did after this fight, and I thought he made a good point that he's watching Jake Paul, and he looks all right. Like, he looks like a novice boxer. He looks like a guy with 4 fights, which is fine because he's had 4 fights, and he's incrementally been taking, I guess, slightly more challenging fights each time out. Because the thing about you have a normal prospect boxer, right, that just gets into the sport, and usually a prospect boxer is not somebody famous and not well known. So you can book him against whatever stiffs you can find laying around the gym. You have to handle a guy like Jake Paul differently because he is so famous. Like, you have to give him somebody with some name recognition so you can build a card around it. That's what's been happening. He, I think he fought another YouTuber, then he fought a former NBA player, then he fought, a former Olympic wrestler / MMA fighter, then he fights a former MMA fighter who, punches a little bit more than the guy he fought prior to that. So he kind of has to have a weird career path automatically, because even though, yes, at the end of the day, he's a 4-0 boxer, you can't give him the same sort of opponents that you give a regular prospect. You've got to give him famous people. So I just wonder what's going to be next for him. Okay, maybe he ends up fighting Tyron Woodley again. He'll probably beat him again. And then, where does he go next? Is he ready then, James, to fight actual boxers after that? Or does he take on another former MMA guy with slightly better striking than the one he just fought?
Yeah, I think it's too dangerous for him to fight other professional boxers at this point, because as Frank mentioned, it is kind of a house of cards to where it's built around him being undefeated. As soon as he loses, a lot of pay-per-view buys, a lot of the interest, a lot of the other fighters with famous names don't want to fight him anymore, once he loses. So I think that's part of the allure. And something I will give Jake Paul credit for that he mentioned in his press conference afterwards is that he's doing something that's pretty unprecedented. I mean, even some of the bigger names, Floyd Mayweather, Canelo Alvarez, I mean, those guys in their first 4 fights, nobody watched them. I mean, did you watch Floyd Mayweather's fight when he was 3-0? Did you watch Canelo Alvarez when he was 3-0? That's not how boxing works. You usually don't start getting noticed until you're about 15-0, 20-0, things like that. He's making tons of money, more money than probably any fighter, any boxer in history in his first 3 or 4 fights than pretty much anybody. So he's doing that part right, at the very least. Now, he's doing it in a way, kind of not the traditional way that a lot of boxing purists won't like it. But I do give him credit for that people are watching his fights at this early level to where he could probably retire after 10 fights. He would have made so much
and don't
money.
forget, he's already rich from things that have nothing to do with fighting too. So he could have retired last year if he wanted to.
Yeah,
probably.
That's true. I mean, he'll have so much money after 10 fights that, he won't have to be one of those guys that, fights 30 times or anything like that. I don't think this is his long-term play.
So at the end of it, Frank, what's the verdict? Does Tyron Woodley losing this fight, does this damage MMA at all? That the MMA fighter goes over to boxing and loses to a YouTuber. Is this damaging to the sport?
100%, yes. 100%. I said it before, a show or two before, and I think I caught some slack for it then. But yeah,
well, I wanted your final verdict though. But I remember you saying it, but I wanted to know if you still feel that way.
I mean, our young fans in this sport, our new fans of this sport, Tyron Woodley's someone they know. He was a recent dominant champion at welterweight in the UFC, and now he just got beat by a boxer, but really just, and what is he currently, an Instagram star? Just a guy out for clicks. It's embarrassing. Tyron is, as you mentioned, I think in the opening, the far superior athlete, but just looked befuddled at certain points in that fight. Just looked like he didn't know what to do. He gets that look in his eye that you referenced that he was having in his skid in the UFC, or he had on and off in his tenure in the UFC, where it just seems like he's checked out. I know Dean Thomas will talk to that when he talk about that when he comes on. And so, I just think it's pun intended, a black eye for mixed martial arts in the UFC. It really is. I think Dana White is going to have to, with this stuff happening, he's going to have to think very carefully about whether or not he releases fighters. It might be worth it to keep people on who are notable or famous and just keep them under contract, throw them a fight here and there, then let them go off into this boxing parody, because it's embarrassing. It's absolutely embarrassing.
Well, what do you think Dana White is more afraid of? Is it releasing a guy who then goes over to Bellator or PFL, or is it releasing a guy who then goes to box a reality show star or a YouTuber for a lot of money? You think that's what? I don't know. Do you agree with that, James? Because I think it's probably worse if a guy goes to. I mean, I guess you could say the UFC doesn't really have competition. But obviously, Bellator and PFL, they're trying to catch up to you. I still feel like that's worse. And I know the UFC has made decisions like that before, wondering, do we really cut this guy? Because then he goes right over to Bellator. Do you think it's worse if they go box a Paul brother?
Yeah, I agree with Frank on this one. I think if they go to boxing and lose, I think that's more damaging. And also the amount of money that they make. I still think that's that's kind of something that needs to be fixed, man. I mean, if Tyron Woodley's making $2 million in one fight, I mean, I would even guess that he hasn't made anything close to that at all in any of his MMA fights. Probably not even more than six figures. So I think that's more damaging than anything, especially with a lot of the conversation about fighter pay right now and unionizing and whether all these things happen. I think you're going to see a lot of former UFC fighters that have the opportunity go to the boxing and make 5-10 times more than they ever made in a UFC fight. I would say that's more damaging than them going to Bellator or PFL, because they can always come back to the UFC once they get hot.
Yeah, Alex, I mean, Tyron Woodley, what was he? Did he lose his last four of his last five, something like that? And his skid out of the UFC. Then he ends up in PFL or Bellator and he gets beat up. Well, that's okay. I mean, these are other professional mixed martial artists, and he was on a slide, and that's why the UFC kicked him out. He lost to an internet guy. He lost who's fighting 2 weight classes too heavy in boxing, by the way. I mean, he's not cutting any weight. I mean, it's just,
And by the way, since we're on this topic,
he lost to one of us, basically. I mean, we just we start boxing for a few years. We don't really fight anybody, and he lost to one of us. Is that a black eye to the sport? Absolutely.
I'm going to give out the code word because it's topical. So I'm going to give it out, write it down, make a mental note of it. And then later this hour, I'm going to ask you for the code word. And the first person to type it in the chat is going to win a $20 Quarter Deck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill gift card. The code word is Jake, Jake. There it is, in honor of Jake Paul, who just defeated Tyron Woodley, and they may even run it back now. So the code word is Jake. Later this hour, I'm going to ask for the code word, and the first person to put it into the YouTube comments, or I guess some people don't have a Google account. You could also tweet it to me if you're so inclined. So either tweet it to me or be the first person to put it in the YouTube comments, Jake, and you're going to win a $20 gift card to the Quarter Deck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. I think, gentlemen, quite frankly, the only thing I'm looking forward to, James, in the aftermath of this fight is I want to see the photo on social media of Tyron's tattoo when he gets it, because that's pretty humiliating, getting another man's name tattooed on yourself after losing a fight to him. That's like the ultimate humiliation. Yeah,
and I remember at the press conference, the post-fight press conference, Paul and his camp made sure they emphasized permanent tattoo, not some little $20 temporary tattoo that you can get and just wash off in a week or two. They mean business. That was an interesting bet, and that even makes a lot more on the judges. It was a close split decision, and the judges are really determining the fate of who gets the tattoo. I mean, that's pretty big. But better to him than me.
I hope, Frank, that Tyron has a lot of tattoos already, because he does, right? Because you don't want that to be like one of your only tattoos. Like if you already have 15 tattoos on yourself, then it's like it's not that big of a deal if you get "I love Jake Paul" tattooed on you. But like for me, I have 0 tattoos, so if my first tattoo was something like that, I'm finished. Like that's the end. Like I can't function anymore.
Did they specify what language the tattoo has to be in? Because you pick a very obscure language, and then
you could do it. You could do it in like Chinese
Sanskrit.
lettering.
Yeah, Sanskrit, something like that. Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
There's ways around this.
Oh man, so yeah, I mean,
yeah.
And let me know anybody watching if you're actually looking forward to seeing a rematch between Tyron Woodley and Jake Paul, because it's one thing to build it up one time and then to get it, and it wasn't particularly entertaining. I mean, the event was a spectacle, and there were actually some good fights on the undercard, but it was a spectacle. But it's like I'm not dying to watch it a second time. I'll tell you something I'm excited for. And James, we were talking about this in our chat earlier today. UFC 267. We've had a bunch of fight announcements. That's going to be September 30th. On Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. Not only is that going to be a stacked card, it's actually going to be available for free. I would presume it's because of the time difference. They don't want to have it in the middle of the night, local time there. They're going to have it on probably in the afternoon, and we're going to be able to watch it. I mean, it's not technically free, but with your ESPN Plus subscription, not an extra pay-per-view price. So we're going to have the headliner, James, is going to be light heavyweight title, Jan Blachowicz, against Glover Teixeira, who I remember like 10 years ago thinking, oh, this guy has like not much time left. He better get his title shot right now. He's like, it's like 40 now, and this dude is ageless. I do think Blachowicz wins and retains, though. You also have the rematch for the bantamweight title between Aljamain Sterling and Piotr Jan. Aljamain, of course, has carried the shame of being a disqualification winner. I'm not saying it's shameful, but he does get very defensive about it because people always poke and prod Aljamain. Hey, like, you got the belt because you won it by disqualification because he illegally need you. So I know he's really looking forward to trying to settle the score and win the fight without any doubt, right? Not by DQ. You've got my guy, Khamzat Chimaev, against Xinglang Li, which is going to be a tremendous fight. Yep. And Chimaev just destroys people, so I cannot wait. I remember a couple months ago we were talking about the UFC wanted to make Chimaev versus Nick Diaz, and I'm a big Nick Diaz guy. I should be his manager, actually, because I have his best interests at heart. And I would say, no, do not agree to fight that guy. That guy is dangerously strong. He can wrestle and he can knock your face off. Like that is not a Diaz brothers need to be fighting strikers, preferably older guys who are on the decline. Those are the fights the Diaz brothers need to take. But I think that fight's going to be really good for Chimaev. Islam Makhachev, who, bro, I am a card-carrying fanboy of his. Oh, I am betting on all the Dagestanis on this card. He's taking on Rafael Dos Anjos. Alexander Volkov is taking on Marcin Tybura. So the main card is absolutely stacked. And Frank, we don't have to pay extra outside of our, $5 a month ESPN Plus subscription for that.
How did that happen, by the way? Because
Fight Island.
They made me pay for stuff that just made no sense. So.
Yeah, didn't we have a pay-per-view recently that was like, what are we paying for this for?
I don't understand how they figured that out, but I'm thankful nonetheless. Yeah.
Oh, man. By the way, hello to Joseph Rodriguez, who I see in the chat there. What's cracking, Joe? So I mean, Frank, which of these fights are you looking forward to most? Where we got Blachowicz Teixeira on this card, we got Aljamain against Jan, the rematch, we got Chimaev, we got Makhachev on the card, Volkov and Tybura. What are you looking forward to most on that slate?
I don't want to sound as old as one of the combatants, but I'm really looking forward to Teixeira's fight because I think his kind of cage wisdom and all the things he's been through as a training partner. I mean, he's been in the sport forever. I mean, I can remember, it seems like over a decade ago, flying to see him fight Rampage Jackson in Chicago. And I thought he would long since have been retired by now. So I feel like with that kind of cage wisdom, he might be the only threat to Jan Blachowicz because I don't see that guy losing otherwise. So I'm very intrigued with that fight. The main event fight, I feel sorry for Aljamain because he was getting tuned up before the knee. So this time, I think he's just going to get absolutely obliterated. He's one of the nicest guys in the sport. So I cringe thinking about it, but he's in a lot of trouble. I think that fight will be over in about a minute.
What about you, James?
I like Chimaev coming back. I like the storyline going through COVID. Possibly retiring. I mean, he went through COVID pretty bad to where he thought that maybe it's not even worth fighting anymore. So he was on such a rocket ship hot streak to where he might have been a title challenger by now. He probably would have fought 2 times. Had he not gotten sick at this point. He had a bout lined up against Leon Edwards, I believe, before the COVID thing. Was that correct? He was scheduled to fight Leon Edwards, I believe.
Yeah, it sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah, so had he beaten Leon Edwards, I mean, he would have been right at the top as far as title challengers. So, but now he kind of has to start. He's fighting an unranked opponent. He's probably going to have to win 2 or 3 fights to kind of get back in that conversation. But he was so dominant before that I'm curious to see if, coming off COVID, coming off his, that battle with COVID, if he can come back as dominant as he once was, because he looks like a serious threat to anyone in that division coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, this Saturday, and by the way, in about 5 minutes, we're going to be joined by Dean Thomas, MMA coach to the stars. Unbelievable dude. He's going to join us at 6:30. We have UFC fights this weekend as well. It's interesting because Derek Brunson has been on an absolute hot streak. Won his last 4 fights. He's the number 5 ranked middleweight in the world. Going up against Darren Till, who's actually lost 3 of his past 4 fights. Yeah. Former welterweight, has had his last 2 fights at middleweight, and he's 1-1. He had a gritty but loss to Robert Whittaker, had a split decision win over Kelvin Gastelum, so he's 1-1 at middleweight, and yet Darren Till is favored in this fight against Derek Brunson, and I guess it's because of his ranginess. They were actually going to do this fight in the UK, but they moved it to the Apex in Vegas, due to COVID concerns. So they wanted to book, the hometown guy. They're really pushing Darren Till. They're trying to make him this generation's Bisping, basically, because Bisping, he used to carry an entire country. Anytime they had an event they wanted to do overseas and in the UK, they would center it on Bisping. They would love for Darren Till to pick up that mantle. Till obviously has won some big fights, but really hasn't. The last time he looked great was, I would say, 2017 when he obliterated Donald Cerrone, and 2-3 since then, and I've not been overly impressed. So, I mean, where do you lean on this fight, James? Do you expect Till to get it done? Because Derek Brunson, to me, such a hard worker, so well-rounded, explosive wrestling, a lot of power. He's been better at that weight class. Am I wrong for leaning to Derek Brunson in this fight?
No, you're not wrong with that, because Brunson is a tough matchup for most people in that division. And, he's a tough matchup for Till as well. But I think with Darren Till, it's just now or never. He's one of those guys where at some point potential has to become reality for him, and he just never quite reached his peak potential. It looked like he was getting there. He got to that title shot with Tyron Woodley and then got knocked out in that fight and just was kind of never the same. Got knocked out by Jorge Masvidal as well. So, it's now or never for him. Is he going to be that is he ever going to turn the corner from being that prospect, that very talented, long-rangey prospect that, as you mentioned, is supposed to be the next, big thing from the UK? Or is he just going to be one of those guys that's just a 500 fighter, just going to be up and down, up and down, up and down? So I think he knows how big this fight is. Even Israel Adesanya is rooting for him, saying, come on, Darren Till, you got to win some fights. I'm looking for some new contenders. Already beat Derek Brunson, already beat, half the division. I'm looking for some new contenders, and Darren Till is that new contender. But he got to win a couple fights. He can't lose to Robert Whittaker and Derek Brunson and all these guys and still expect a title shot. So I think there's so much is on the line for Till in this fight that I think he'll pull it through.
What do you think, Frank?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking.
No worries.
Darren Till is really kind of following. I mean, you made the reference to the UFC wanting to be the next Michael Bisping. He's really kind of following that in a way in which Michael Bisping's career would look disappointing for a while, and then it would cycle back and disappointing. But he just kept grinding and grinding and grinding until he finally got that incredible win over Luke Rockhold. But Darren Till has to win this fight. The slide cannot continue. This is really important for him, and he's going to lose, unfortunately, because Derek Brunson is better everywhere, in my opinion, everywhere. And James brought up the Masvidal knockout that Till suffered. You can't lose by knockout to a 155-pound guy. And I'm saying Masvidal's a 155-pound guy because he really is. He really is that. He was small for welterweight. Darren is now a middleweight. I mean, it's, this is a mess for him. He's going to lose to Derek Brunson. He won't achieve the Michael Bisping status the UFC so desperately wants him to have, and I think he's going to wash out. I think this fight begins the washout.
By the way, I want to unleash the code word. If you want a $20 Quarter Deck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill gift card, we revealed a code word, a 4-letter code word a short while ago. Be the first to give us that code word, and you're going to be on your way to the Quarter Deck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill, enjoying $20 worth of delicious food, 2-for-1 happy hour. We're going to get some mileage out of that, and you can watch every UFC pay-per-view fight for zero cover charge at the Quarter Deck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. We're going to be joined in a couple of minutes by Dean Thomas, who's going to join us. So it's going to be an interesting card this weekend, going to be an interesting next couple of weeks. And as Joseph mentioned in the chat, Tom Aspinall against Sergey Spivak is also going to be good. Alex Perez, Matt Schnell on the card. Alex Morano against David Zawada. What do you give this card a grade for, Frank? Is this a free cards go B-, C+, somewhere in that range?
No, which card are we talking about? I don't know if you can hear
this weekend,
but there is a tremendous rainstorm over my bat cave, and I've got a metal roof.
It was cats and dogs down here.
So, I'm sorry. So I've fallen behind you.
Turn those headphones up, man.
I'm going deaf too. Did I mention that? I also can't see very clearly.
For the card this weekend, you think C+, B-?
C. Let's just go straight C.
Okay.
Yeah, they do too many. I keep ranting about this. They need to. I mean, it's enough. And then this weekend, I mean, look, if you're the UFC, you don't have to try to counter program everybody. Like, this is the launch of college football. So, take a step back, pick your moment, pick your spot, because they're going to get horrible ratings. And then they're going to, and then that's going to be a concern to everyone. And then it's going to be like, hey, it shouldn't have been a concern at all. It should never have gone up against one of the most impressive opening slate of college football games I can remember in a long time for a Labor Day weekend. So, yeah, I'm going C and I'm going F for picking this weekend to do it.
and when they do fights at the Apex, I mean, you can't really even get a big crowd in there. It's just a small, tight venue, to hold a UFC card. And it's like, yeah, do they really have to do that, 3 weeks out of 3 weeks every month? They like if you combine some of these cards, you have some really good cards. But if you keep doing it every week, that kind of makes things thin.
By the way, we got a winner on Twitter. Marla wins the $20 gift card to the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. But by the way, we're talking about the middleweight division. This is really high praise from the GOAT of that weight class. Anderson Silva was talking about Israel Adesanya, the current champion, who's kind of cleaned out that division already. And Anderson Silva said, let me tell you something very important. Israel is the big champion. By the way, there's nothing more charming than Anderson speaking English, because always like the way he words things in his second language is always great. Israel is the big champion, he told Submission Radio. Israel has a lot of experience in kickboxing, and I don't see anybody that can challenge Israel in his weight class. Probably in different weight class, and we already saw that happen. But in 185, I don't think so. And guys, obviously, Israel's going to have his prime, which I think will last at least a few more years. And then eventually, like Anderson Silva before him, there's going to be a decline. But for as long as Israel's prime goes, I would tend to agree, because the only fight that he lost was when he moved up to try and catch a second belt against Jan Blachowicz. And Frank, I don't know if you saw it a different way, but honestly, I don't think Blachowicz would have won that fight if not just by virtue of being bigger and stronger and having the perfect game plan to maximize those traits, because that one was all about body weight and grappling. And I don't think a man of Israel's size would have been able to beat him with that sort of a game plan. So honestly, I've been bullish on Stylebender since he burst on the scene. And I think Anderson Silva is right. For as long as Israel's prime lasts, I don't see anyone dethroning him at 185.
Look, that you're right about that fight, but it was also, Jan also won it because of discipline. He didn't put himself in counter positions for Israel to prey on him. He does. I mean, that's how Adesanya really takes advantage of people. Look, he's beatable. Kelvin Gastelum showed us that. He's absolutely beatable. Yoel Romero scared him into inactivity for most of a fight. I mean, the guy is beatable. Unfortunately, though, it's going to take a tremendous amount of discipline and just the right fighter. And I know who that fighter is. It's Robert Whittaker. I'm waiting for that fight to happen. I know look, Robert Whittaker has all the skills. He made a terrible mistake in the fight where he lost the belt. But he is supremely talented, a fantastic striker. And if he could just work on not putting himself in those positions and overcommitting on strikes, I think that he could win a decision over Israel Adesanya. So, like Anderson Silva in his prime clean out the division, you couldn't imagine anyone beating him. And when he would go up to 205, he would clown those guys.
That is true. He did.
Adesanya is miles away from that. I almost feel like I'm having like the Jordan LeBron debate, It's like true. I mean, it's like, get out of here. I mean, it's not like the gulf that exists between Jordan and LeBron. Like these two periods are relatively close. They actually fought each other, for God's sake. So
yeah, that's true.
And Anderson Silva held his own, and he's 75 years old. So come on, man. Israel Adesanya is great, but he's beatable, and I think he's beatable. He looks beatable to me. When I watch him, he looks impressive, talented, spectacular, exciting, and beatable. Anderson Silva never looked beatable until he got beat.
Yeah.
All right. So hold on. We had Frank rambled on for too long.
Yes.
We had Dean Thomas ready to go, and then apparently he dropped off. So
well,
I'm going to try.
He was going to say everything I was going to say.
Is that why? So he thought I don't even have to talk to these guys.
Yeah, Frank's
So
never going to shut up.
Hold on. I'm gonna text him to come back in. But James, what do you think about what Silva said about Adesanya? Anyone at that weight class can challenge him.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a distance. Whitaker has a chance. Whitaker has the fight IQ. He's been in there with him before.
So there he is.
Hey,
there he is. He's back.
Hey, Dean.
I'm back.
So Dean, I wanted to. We were just reading this quote from Anderson Silva, who referred to Israel Adesanya, who he's fought before, lost to in the twilight of his career, of course. He referred to him as the big champion and said that no one at 185 can beat this guy. Do you agree? Do you think anyone in that weight class, and hey, maybe it's Robert Whitaker in a rematch, do you see anyone at 185 dethroning Izzy?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I had to pick anybody that can do it, I would say Robert Whitaker might have the best shot now. And, but again, like the sample size of how often these guys fight is so small that it's hard to tell sometimes. And they get that one opportunity to do it and then they fail. And then we're like, oh, this person can't ever do it. But I think Robert Whitaker might possess a skill set that he may be able to do it. I've counted him out so many times and he shut me up so many times that I would say probably Robert Whitaker, but I still think that Izzy is probably a more diverse, well-rounded fighter. Not a more well-rounded, but a fighter who wins the majority of the time if they do fight.
Nice. And by the way, I was enjoying your commentary this past weekend. You do a really good job when they bring you in for insight on the broadcast. We were watching the Battle of the Kickers, and Chikadze ends up putting away Edson Barboza. That was just a beautiful fight to watch, Dean, because Barboza, obviously he's been doing it at a high level for a really long time, pretty conventional the way he approaches a fight, whereas Chikadze, his style is so different, and the way he's able to throw in those kicks at just hellacious speed out of nowhere. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC because of that and those liver kicks and everything he does. How high do you see him ascending? Talking about Giga Chikadze, is he going to be a future champion, at least a championship contender? Where do you see him going?
I mean, that was definitely a tough test for Chikadze. I mean, you think about it, Edson Barboza is a tough guy, but it's also it was also a winnable fight for him even prior to the fight happening. And you think about it because Edson's not going to try to take him down. And I think the people that try to take him down are going to give him a problem. And Edson never tried to take him down. Chikadze is a lot faster than I expected. I thought Edson would have the speed advantage because I thought he would be a little bit more explosive and powerful. But Chikadze showed that he's the best striker in the UFC, regardless of weight class. Yeah. I mean, the way he did what he did was just remarkable. But I do think that a guy like Volkanovski would give him problems because of, Volkanovski's a little smaller, but I think that'll work to his advantage because he's a smaller target. But he's also, did you guys lose me for a second?
For a split second. You're good.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, but Volkanovski's a little smaller, but he could use that to his advantage. And I think that he would be able to get inside and get him down, and he'd give him a problem. Other guys might be able to do that as well. Arnold Allen, Josh Emmett, maybe. So, but Chikadze, the sky's the limit for him as long as he takes his time and keeps getting better with each fight.
Now, Dean, Tyron Woodley better than most. What was your assessment of his boxing debut on Sunday?
I mean, I know how well Tyron can box, and when he did throw punches, he showed that he can fight, and he showed that he can box. He just, he's got to get out of his own way and get out of his own head of holding back. And I think for him, and this is why I will always say that we need open scoring, because for him, I think he really thought he was winning that fight. Yeah. The fact that Tyron typically backs up when he's in combat says something, because he was actually moving forward this whole fight. So I think in his eyes, he was winning that fight and had no rush to do more. And I think with open scoring, if he had looked up and saw that he was losing, that would have forced him to do more. And that's not an excuse for him. It's just, just what it is for me. But, Tyron can box. He can fight. Obviously, at 39, he doesn't have the killer instinct, killer instinct. But I don't know. I don't know where he goes from here. It's up to him. I mean, he's still got a good life.
Hey, Dean, I got kind of a two-part question, but the first part we were talking about earlier in the show. Tyron Woodley recently a dominant UFC champion. So is losing to Jake Paul a black eye for the sport of mixed martial arts, or specifically the UFC?
No, I don't think so. I think the only people who would think that are like, Jake Paul's 15-year-old fans would probably be like, oh, well, look how tough Jake Paul is. But I think
that's my second question. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think real combat fans or even casual combat fans knew the deal. They knew what this was. They knew this was Tyron Woodley, an MMA guy who was retired, was essentially kind of retired, a little older. And everybody knew what it was. I mean, it just nothing really proved in this fight. Like, Jake Paul didn't look bad. He certainly didn't look good. Tyron didn't look bad. He didn't really look good. I mean, it was kind of a wash.
What I'm worried about, Dean, and this is my second question, what I'm worried about is, you're not as old as I am, lucky for you, but we're all, we're older people. So this just seems stupid, this kind of a fight. I mean, I'm glad that Tyron got paid, and it's not stupid to make a lot of money, but this fight seems dumb. And, no, it doesn't have any effect on MMA or the reputation of the UFC. But what about the fact that Jake Paul has like 7 billion views of his crap, and there's this whole generation that will ultimately be fight fans.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm terrified of.
Well, this is why Jake Paul did it in the first place. I mean, Jake Paul's a kid, he's from Ohio. He tries to live the life and act tough. But but everybody still sees him as the Disney kid. So, yeah. So Jake Paul's way of kind of erasing that mystique and that moniker was to fight and to box. He couldn't do MMA because it takes too long to learn. Yeah. So get in there and box. Who does he box? He boxes another YouTuber. Then he boxes a basketball player. Then he boxes a wrestler in Ben. Then he goes, all right, now I'm really going to dig deep and challenge somebody. They handpicked Tyron. It almost didn't work out for him. And what did he do as soon as it was over? He said, I need to get my teeth fixed. I need to get a haircut. I don't want to do this again. Because he knew that was probably his ceiling.
Wow.
Yeah, he couldn't go any further. I mean, Jake Paul, honestly, in my opinion, looked like an amateur out there.
I agree with that. I agree.
I don't see him going any further. I think he realized he dodged a bullet with that first fight with Tyron. He'll probably never do it again. He went in retirement, said he's going to come out because I think, just to keep his name out there. Yeah. But he won't fight anybody legit. Trust me.
So do you not think then that there's going to be a rematch? And if there's not going to be a rematch, does that mean Tyron should not get the I love Jake Paul tattoo? Because he seemed to only be with. And listen, I wouldn't want to. Now, he's a man of his word. I get it. I wouldn't necessarily want to get the dude's name tattooed on my body. But Tyron seemed to say, hey, give me the rematch. Paul said, I'll give you the rematch. If you get the tattoo, I'll get the tattoo. Is he still going to get the tattoo?
I doubt it. I mean, I guess if it's for the rematch, you will, because there's a lot of money involved in that. So, like, who wouldn't? Like,
yeah, it's like a $2 million tattoo then.
Yeah, I would get it for that. But, like, the reality is, the reality is that I don't think Jake Paul is going to want to fight him again. I think Jake Paul went through that training camp and realized how hard it is to be a combat athlete. And you could tell he put his heart and soul into that camp. And then he went out there and almost got knocked out. He dodged the bullet and is probably like, you know what? I proved to the world that I can fight. Everyone knows that I can fight now. I'm not the Disney kid. Everyone knows that. So let's go back to making videos.
Dean, if we could turn the page a little bit to back to the UFC. I really enjoy the way you see fights. So I'm curious your answer with this. What fight are you currently looking forward to the most going on for the next few months? Because there's a lot of big fights out there.
Hold on. Besides Nick Diaz, Robbie Lawler, because that's so obvious.
It's fun. I actually hung out with Robbie all day yesterday. We filmed another episode of the Dean Diaries, so make sure y'all look for that the week of the fight. So that'll be coming out. But honestly, I really do think I'm looking forward to that whole day is going to be great. That New York card, the Colby and Usman fight. I think I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. And the Gaethje and Chandler fight. I mean, those are just fights that I really want to see, see how they play out. But I think Colby and Usman is probably the fight that I'm looking forward to the most because I have high hopes for Usman, but Colby's he's a gamer, man. Like you can't shut him up, can't shut him down.
Let me jump in quickly. The Chandler fight, Gaethje Chandler fight, are they moving that out of New York? Do you have any info on that?
I have no info on that, but as far as I know now, is it's still in New York.
Okay.
But I don't make those decisions. But just from
I thought
reading
you made
the
those
internet.
decisions about.
Yeah.
What about Brunson versus Till coming up? It's an interesting one because Derek Brunson, he's been on a tear. He's won his last 4 fights. I mean, he seems to be addressing things after he lost to Israel Adesanya. He hasn't lost since then. Darren Till, he's lost 3 of his last 4 fights. He's 1-1 since moving up to middleweight. Yet Till's favored in the fight, and Adesanya really wants him to keep winning because Adesanya wants to fight him. So what do you think happens, Dean, this weekend, Till or Brunson?
Darren Till is a fighter, but I think he's a bit overrated. If you look at his resume, his biggest win probably was over Cowboy. His biggest win was over Cowboy.
Way on the
we
decline.
All know Cowboy is and he's a slow starter, and he took advantage of that. Other than that, like Darren Till hasn't really looked like he had improved much, other than beating like Wendell Oliveira. So I like Derek Brunson in this fight. I'm surprised the odds are what they are, considering that Derek Brunson is a good wrestler. He still punches with his chin up. I don't know why he hasn't fixed that yet. How does this guy still get away with punching with his chin way in the air? But he's gotten away with it against a lot of good people. I think Derek Brunson goes out there and beats Darren Till this weekend.
Awesome.
And I think get Johnathan Ramlakhan pop in, my friend. I think Johnathan had a question for Dean. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I do have a question. So pleasure meeting you, Dean. By the way, like you're saying, great commentary. I love how real you keep it on the commentary booth. It's always fun to listen to you talk. And I have a question about the Ortega-Volkanovski matchup because I'm going to be hosting that fight for my birthday. I'm curious, how do you think that matchup is going to go overall? Because the striking of Ortega has picked up a lot. And, Volkanovski has good top pressure while Ortega has good jiu-jitsu. How do you think that matchup is going to go?
Yeah, that's a tough, if Ortega didn't do what he did to the Korean Zombie, I'd say Volkanovski beats him all day long because I don't think Ortega is going to be able to take Volkanovski down. And I would say Volkanovski has the better striking, but I don't think I'm not confident he has the better striking between the two. It's a really tough matchup, but I think Volkanovski might be the better competitor of the two. I think Brian Ortega is a fighter. He's a fighter's fighter. He's going to go out on his shield. But I think Volkanovski is just a better competitor. And when you count the rounds up, Volkanovski is going to win more rounds than Ortega will because he competes for rounds.
So, Dean, another fight, November 6th. I want your take on Justin Gaethje taking on Michael Chandler, and this is a big W for MMA fans because we've all been saying, okay, these guys have to fight each other. This fight has to happen, and it's going to happen November 6th. Obviously Chandler has got a very nice wrestling background. Usually chooses not to use it. He loves to brawl and swing for the fences. And Justin Gaethje loves to brawl and swing for the fences. He fights like a crazy person, also has a wrestling background. I figure somebody is getting slept in this fight. So who's it going to be? Who comes out on top there?
I kind of lean towards Gaethje, and here's why. Because Gaethje can make more mistakes in that fight and still win. Chandler can't really make mistakes in this fight. And not to say that he will, but I'm just saying he can't make any mistakes and still win this fight. Because he doesn't take punches as well as Gaethje does. Chandler doesn't take a punch well, and he's going up against probably pound for pound the hardest puncher in the UFC in Gaethje. If he gets hit, that can be the end of it. So he has to really fight a smart fight in order to win this fight. I lean a little bit. If I had to lean, I'd lean a little bit towards Gaethje for that reason. Chandler has to fight the smartest fight he can and not take a big shot in this fight, or he can't win it.
Whose wrestling's better, Gaethje or Chandler?
I think I think Chandler might have the better pure wrestling, but Gaethje only has to do is stop it. Right. And I think he'll be able to. I don't think Chandler will take him down. I don't think he'll be able to take him down. But but he just can't take a punch. He can't allow Gaethje to punch him. That's it.
Hey, since we have an audience with a man who routinely films things with and is around Dana White, they have a good relationship. Dean, I got to ask you, do you have any insight on if and when we are ever going to see John Jones against Francis Ngannou? I know Ngannou's got a fight coming up, but surely Dana has told you something behind the scenes about this. Can you spill it?
He has not. Dana's a weird character. Like, if you're not in Dana's circle, like in the immediate moment, it's like he won't, like, you don't have any communication with him. Like, there's no talking to him. But when you're in his circle, you're the best of friends. But then outside, you're like, that's it. There's no talk. Like, I don't know anything.
So who do we need to get on here? Nick the Tooth? Is that the guy we need to find?
Nick the Tooth. I promise you, he hasn't talked to Dana in 5 years.
Oh man!
Hey, have you guys seen the clip of John Jones working out now recently? Because
I have not seen that.
Yeah, he looked dreadfully slow, and that the article about it was like he looks terrible in this weight class. And I was just wondering, Dean, like, is that like gamesmanship? Because I know John Jones loves that gamesmanship stuff, and that is he putting out a video making himself look slow? To
probably. I'd be more willing to bet that John Jones is not stupid. He's not going to put out a crappy video and say, "Hey guys, look at this." Right. He's not going to do that. John Jones he's a fox. He's a cheat. He'll lie. He'll steal to get an advantage. He's not putting out a crappy video for the sake of making himself look bad.
All right.
But I'll tell you this though. I will say this. I don't have. This isn't truth, but this is just for what I think. I don't think Dana White cares if John Jones fights or not. Yeah. He's got the stars. He's got the stars. So he's not begging John Jones to come back. They got Cyril gone. They made him a champion. They don't care about John Jones right now.
Ooh. Your take on interim belts, Dean, because I know why they're there. They look great on the poster. Oh, we got a title fight, but come on, the whole interim belt thing, it's a joke.
Yeah, but who does it hurt? It doesn't hurt nobody.
It hurts me. It makes me upset.
Everybody's so offended by an interim belt. Like, why are you offended? Like, what did it do to you?
Hold on, guys. I got an interim belt. Hold on, I'm gonna get it. Hold on.
Oh yeah, he actually does. He's got a belt.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he was actually given that belt by the late great our friend Howard Davis Jr. at Fight Time Promotions. They gave Frank a belt back in the day, and it's actually.
Is this offending you guys? I got an interim belt here.
A little bit. Who'd you beat to get that belt?
I don't remember.
Oh, I'm a little offended.
I'm going to defend it against Jake Paul. I'm calling him out. I want $2 million.
I would pay to watch that. I would pay more to watch that than I would for him to watch a former MMA guy. I love how Frank is it just me or did Frank freeze? Oh, there he is.
He froze. Frank, you can run, but you can't hide. You've been talking about working out with me for a long time. Yeah, you can run, but you can't hide.
You know what? We can actually do that now because it's funny because just to take you guys behind the curtain, for years, we had wanted to do a bit. Frank had offered to go into the gym and have Dean Thomas actually put him through a training regimen that an MMA fighter would go through, just so we could all kind of laugh at Frank and see how he does. But we couldn't do it before because when we were on terrestrial radio, there was a big company, there was a lot of red tape, there was insurance, there were lawyers involved, and we were basically told, if you do this, there are going to be consequences. We can't let you do this. But we're on 5 Reasons Sports, guys. We're on the goddamn internet. Anything goes. I think we can do this, and I don't think we're going to have to get any lawyers involved. So Frank, now, when we were planning on doing this was a few years ago. You were a much younger man. The hairline was farther down. Are you still okay doing this?
Wait. First of all, I've had a 5 head since I was 12. Okay, there's nothing happening there. Second of all, I am ready to go. Let's set this up. I've had lower back surgery and neck fusion surgery in the last 2 years. Oof. But now I'm right. Got it all fixed. Bring me in there. Let's do it.
Oh Lord. Geriatric training. Oh no. Oh man.
God. Oh my God.
But I'm down. No, listen, Frank. Listen.
Let's do it.
Come bring it. Come bring it, man. We can make it happen. We can film it. We can make a whole ordeal, a whole production out of this.
We should do all four of us and see who does the best.
Oh, I love it.
It's probably going to be Johnathan because Johnathan
probably.
he trains Muay Thai multiple times a week. So it's probably going to be Johnathan.
I agree.
I'm just starting. I'm just starting.
Still, how many sessions have you had?
About 24.
Oh,
That's good.
that's 24 more than me, bro. You're going to be good. You're going to be fine.
I don't think Johnathan realizes I took jiu-jitsu for a number of years and never advanced past white belt. I am officially the most dangerous white belt in the world.
Yeah, and the great thing about that is, Frank, tell him why you never advanced past white belt.
Well, I didn't want to be that guy with one of the middle belts. I just wanted to go right from white to black.
He didn't want to advance a belt until he was ready to test for black. So he just wanted to keep the white until he was at black belt level, which I kind of admire that in a weird way.
I wanted to be a sleeper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, since you guys don't have a lot of experience, we can do challenges. What we'll do is we'll put an apple on Frank's head and see who can kick it off.
Can I do a drop kick from the top rope?
I don't care what kind of kick you use.
Oh, man. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Dean Thomas is a show favorite. You guys can understand why. Dean, let the people know, man. You've got your hands in everything. You're a part of the UFC broadcasts. You've got reality shows. You've got shows all over the internet. You sometimes do stand-up comedy and improv and plays. Where can people see you next, sir?
Well, let's see. Next, I guess the next thing I'll be doing is the fight in on the 25th, September 25th, in 3 weeks. But that week, make sure y'all check out the Dean Diaries. I'll be hanging out with Lawler. You'll get an insight on what Lawler does during his regular life. And I don't think anybody has ever captured that type of footage before with Robbie. So shout out to Robbie for letting me get that type of access. And just on a normal basis, if you want to see some cool TikTok dances, go to my Instagram and my Twitter and check me out, or TikTok, and check me out there at Dean Thomas, DIN Thomas, and, see some cool content.
Now, without giving anything away from Dean Diaries, does Robbie Lawler, does he have like a wild side that we don't know about? Because I imagine him being like out of training, like a very ordinary dude. Does he like go party it up and I just don't realize this?
Think 90s teen pop star.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta watch this Dean Dyer. Oh, damn, you had me going there. I'm like, oh my god, this guy's like 90s Timberlake or something.
Yeah. No, I mean, Robbie's a cool guy. I mean, but again, like, we get to see some insight on how he lives and how he thinks and how he processes. So it was a cool experience.
Well, that's really cool. Everybody check out Dean Diaries. Dean Thomas, thank you so much for taking some time, my friend. We appreciate you. Enjoy your weekend coming up.
All right, fellas, y'all be good.
All right, take care, Dean.
Peace.
And Dean Thomas, Dean is absolutely everywhere. Like, I can remember when I first started working with Dean like 10, 11 years ago, we were calling fights together for Fight Time Promotions that I had just got to know him a little bit. And then I was on a vacation with my wife in Orlando, and we're eating. I don't exactly remember why. I do like this place, though. We were eating at a random Tijuana Flats in Orlando, and I look over at the wall and I see a picture of Dean Thomas, like with the manager, like they had a photo. So I'm like, dude, this guy's freaking everywhere. He knows everybody. Like he is a social butterfly. This dude is all over the place. We got our pal Johnathan Ramlakhan with us. I always point the wrong direction here on the StreamYard. He's over there or up there. So, man, first of all, Johnathan, your take on Woodley and Paul, and God, I hope Dean's right that we don't have to see this again, because I watched the first one and I'm good. I would be good if they never fought again.
Yeah, I'm definitely good if they never fought again. As far as how I thought the fight went, I thought it was a pretty unanimous decision. You know, I really didn't see how the judge scored it in Woodley's favor. Now, Clarissa Shields said that she thought Woodley won. She's the MMA, the boxing GOAT. So,
yeah, true.
She has that mind. But in my opinion, I was scoring it live, and I felt like it was 6 rounds to 2 or 7 rounds to 1. It wasn't a particularly close fight outside of that one round. I think it was round 4 where Woodley had, let it go. But like you guys alluded to earlier in the show, it was just the same version of Woodley in a different sport. A hesitant Woodley, a Woodley that's shy to throw his punches for whatever reason. We know that Jake Paul has some decent punching power, But Tyron Woodley is good enough to avoid those punches and land when he wants to. And we saw that in the fourth round when he had him hurt, he was actually throwing some of those punches, but it was just the rest of the rounds we didn't see that. So, I mean, it was a fun fight. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the drama of it. I enjoyed the buildup of it. I mean, the social media part of it. You're getting a whole bigger, broader spectrum of an audience to come in and watch sports. And how many times this weekend did we hear UFC welterweight champion Tyron Woodley, right? The UFC is all over this too, even though they're technically not promoting it. So it's also good because you're getting eyes on the UFC. And maybe if you're a guy that wants Jake Paul to lose, hey, I'm going to check out the UFC, see who's good in the UFC. Who do I want to box this guy now, right? Now you're checking out, seeing who you want to come knock out Jake Paul next because you don't like Jake Paul. He's a very polarizing figure, so he's very easy to hate. So I think it's good at the end of the day. I know Frank doesn't like it because he's a purist, and it definitely, in my opinion, it made the MMA community look bad. Tyron Woodley let the entire MMA community down. He was supposed to go out there.
People were mad. Like, people were really mad. I noticed on Twitter, like, people were really mad that he lost that fight. He let him down.
You know, one thing that he did wrong, in my opinion, that we didn't touch on, Johnathan, was, in my opinion, it was the heaviest Tyron's ever fought in wrestling and mixed martial arts.
190.
Huge mistake, I thought, for him, because I really thought that as the fight went on, he would have the cardiovascular advantage over Jake Paul, who I just don't take seriously as somebody who's out running 10 miles a day. You know, his body doesn't look like it. I mean, I knew he'd be the better boxer because that's all he does, but I didn't think that he would have – I didn't think I'd see them both gas simultaneously going into the sixth round. And so I was super disappointed at Tyron for that.
Yeah, I think there's something to be learned from this, though. You know, if you kind of take away the whole – purist aspect and why all the hate and things like that. For one, Jake Paul took a pay cut, I read, so that everyone on the undercard can have their highest payday, and including Tyron Woodley had his highest payday ever. So he's figured out how to monetize this sport at an early level. He's only 4-0, and he's already figured out how to monetize at a time when boxers at that with that kind of record usually gets taken advantage of, until they get the right management, and later on they're 20-0 and stuff like that. So I think there's some lessons that can be learned from this, even if, most people most of us anyway, don't necessarily like the whole sideshow of it. He's figured out some things monetarily that I think the sport could really benefit from. And in terms of promotion, to where people are paying attention to this, where there are very good boxing champions out there that no one really knows when they're fighting. I'll see some champions say, "Oh, there's a fight Saturday between this guy and this guy." I had no idea,
Exactly.
So there's some things that I think can be taken from this whole Jake Paul experience, that the sport could benefit from.
Here's something I want to go around the table on. I found is interesting. Now, Justin Gaethje, he's coming back. He's going. He's mended fences with the UFC. He signed a contract extension. I mentioned with Dean, he's going to be fighting Michael Chandler in November. Gaethje has been very critical of the state of his weight class, the lightweight division in the UFC. Now, of course, his most recent fight, going on almost a year, was that loss to the GOAT, Khabib Nurmagomedov, before he decided to retire. And then since Khabib's retirement, that's when Johnathan Gaethje, and I do think part of this is sour grapes. Like, I'd like to think, oh, he's just purely speaking objectively, but part of it is sour grapes, because even though he had just lost the fight to Khabib, he was ranked higher than the guys who did fight for the vacant title. So he thought he should have been a part of that. He thought, if anything, it should have been him and Chandler fighting for the belt, or no, him and Poirier, actually. Yeah. He thought it should have been him and Poirier fighting for the belt, not Chandler and Oliveira fighting for the belt. So there are a couple of holes in that theory, and I don't even disagree with him, because I was very critical of that Oliveira versus Chandler fight. Not to say I'm not impressed with Charles Oliveira, who's probably going to lose to Dustin Poirier, though. But Charles Oliveira, a good fighter. He seems somewhat deserving of having a belt around his waist. So I can understand Gaethje being critical, but I also think part of it is a little bit of jealousy that he wasn't a part of that fight. And then the other part of it that kind of puts a hole in it, Johnathan, is, let's remember, the reason why Dustin Poirier was not part of that fight was he didn't want to be part of that fight. He actually chose a huge payday to fight Conor McGregor over fighting for the actual belt. So, if Gaethje is concerned that the UFC doesn't always book fights based on merit, there was another guy who got an opportunity on merit, and he chose a different path instead.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think a little bit of it is because he's a little salty because, he was left out. But I mean, he's kind of been blue-balled since he lost to Khabib, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion, it should have been, if not him and Poirier, I think him and Charles Oliveira would have been a great matchup because, he was the interim champion, whether you want to put a lot of weight on that because that happened with the Ferguson fight during the pandemic. He was the interim title. He lost to Khabib. Everybody lost to Khabib. So that's not really a dirt on your record. And outside of that, he's built up a good resume. In my opinion, Michael Chandler shouldn't have fought for the championship. I know he's, a Dana White. He kind of does the right thing every time. And shout out to him, right? Shout out to him for doing the right thing every time, being a backup to that Khabib fight with Justin Gaethje and doing all the right things. That's kind of why he got in the position where he was. And on top of that, a spectacular knockout over Dan Hooker. So I do can see why he says that. And I agree with him because I think Dustin's number one. And like you said, he chose the money fight twice. And the divisions, like you were talking about, the division hasn't been having the number one fighter as the champion since Khabib left. So I can see why he's saying that because, it's either Dustin or Justin at this point who can be the number one guy. All due respect to Charles Oliveira, but the number one guy isn't the champion right now. So that's why he feels that way, and I think he's justified.
Well, I think the division will figure itself out eventually. I mean,
exactly.
by this time next year, the right guys will be fighting the right guys, and whoever is the best guy will be the champion at this point in 1 year. The thing that comes
probably Islam.
Well, yeah.
God, I hope so. It's just I'm telling you, in 5 years, every champion will be Dagestani. Do they have heavyweights? Like I think everything for at least from like 170 down will all be from Dagestan.
Yeah, but here's the part that comes off a little hypocritical to me. If Justin was in Dustin's position, what would he have done? What do you think he would have done? If there's a 7-figure fight sitting on the table to fight Conor McGregor, would Justin Gaethje take the $1 million fight and the $8 million rematch or whatever Dustin made in the rematch, or would he have taken a much bigger pay cut in that respect to fight for the title? I think Justin Gaethje would have done the same thing, and that Dustin did, and most fighters would do the same thing. The belt will be there. All you have to do is keep winning. The belt will be there. Make the money that you've never seen in your career and may never see again, in your career by fighting Conor McGregor twice. So I think his comments come off as a bit hypocritical because I think just like Dustin did, most fighters in his position would have done the same thing, including Justin Gaethje. So to say the division's all mixed up and all this kind of stuff, he could have done the same thing. He just wasn't the person in that position to do so.
What do you think, Frank?
If you're, I talked about this before, I can't remember which show, but if you have good management and you're a good fighter, that management is advising you of one of two paths, and you have to evaluate the division, the depth of the division to choose the path. You can make money two ways in the UFC as a great fighter. One, you can become a long reigning champion. Kamaru Usman, Israel Adesanya is an example of that. Khabib Nurmagomedov was a recent example in this very division of that, where you make a name and you make a statement because you keep winning and you keep knocking people off and you're cleaning out the division. You can make money that way. Or if your division is really stacked and you just don't stand out, because as much as we all agree that Dustin Poirier is the number one guy, he's not there's not a dramatic difference between him and any of the top 3 or 4 guys. So if that's the state of your division, well, Dustin, don't go fight Charles Oliveira because you're probably going to lose the title in the next fight. And then you're forgotten. Then you're out. So better to pick the big money fights, make as much money as you can, and grab the belt. And if you can hold on to it, great. If you can't, don't. So Dustin Poirier is getting great advice, exactly what he should be doing. And who cares what Justin Gaethje says about it? I mean, who cares? I mean, Justin Gaethje should be doing the same thing. He should be watching and learning and saying, look, I also can't hold on this belt very long. There's this Islam guy coming for me, and most of the guys at the top could probably beat me on any given Sunday. So better for me just to, grab money too. He should be talking smack to Conor McGregor as much as anybody.
Exactly.
Oh, Alex's mic's off. I can keep rambling. I mean,
sorry about that. I muted it before because I heard my kid making noise in the background. I wanted to ask a question to Johnathan before we wrap it up in a few minutes. Something we were talking about a little bit earlier. So we're looking. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, guys. So we're looking ahead at some of these fights coming up. Jorge Masvidal is coming back. Let's get into this, guys. So Jorge Masvidal, his manager, Malky Kawa, spoke to the media, says, we're just trying to see what the next steps are. He had, a bit of a head injury after the punishment that he took from Kamaru Usman last time out. So the matchups that seem to be on the table for Masvidal, grudge match with Leon Edwards has been a popular suggestion. Rematch with Nate Diaz, maybe a potential bout with Gilbert Burns or Vicente Luque. I like many of those options, but to me, I would like to see him squash the beef and settle it with Leon Edwards. I think that's the direction I would like to go in. Now, and actually, something interesting about that is, I think part of the reason why we've not seen the UFC in any rush to make that happen is they had a physical altercation behind the scenes, which was caught on camera. And I think the UFC does not want it to look like we are going to reward that sort of behavior by matching these two guys up with one another, right? Because then you know what's going to happen. You're going to have more and more guys throwing hands backstage because that's how you get a fight.
They rewarded a guy for throwing a chair at a bus, Alex.
That was Connor.
Too.
Yeah, but True.
They made sure we saw the footage and heard all about it. I mean, if UFC doesn't want that getting out, it's not getting out. So don't get twisted on that, buddy.
Fair enough. But you also think about who it was that got rewarded that time around. He gets whatever he wants at any given time. But what do you think, Johnathan? Out of those potential fights, what do you think about names like Luque, Gilbert Burns, Nate Diaz, who he has fought before, or the grudge match with Leon Edwards? What would you like to see from Masvidal?
Personally, I think a fun fight would be the Leon Edwards fight. I mean, that's the whole reason I have the 3-piece combo thing. Like that came from when he was talking about delivering the 3-piece in the buffet or the 3-piece in the soda. So that's the whole reason I even have this this name or moniker. But yeah, I think that's the fight to make, man. There's a lot of heat going behind it. It's a fight that everybody has wanted to see. And, this is something that is good for Leon Edwards as well. He has a guy that just fought for the belt twice, and he can put that name in his bag, and that's a big name, right? You just beat the BMF. You probably put yourself up a little bit higher unless somehow the same thing that happens with Nate Robinson happens to him again, or it's Nate Diaz happens
you
to him.
You definitely don't want what happened to Nate Robinson happening.
Yeah, definitely not that. That's, Nate Robinson and Jorge Masvidal had the same fate when he faced Usman. But I think the Leon Edwards fight is the fight to make. There's a lot of heat to it. It would sell. That still allows Masvidal to be the draw that he is. And I think in the octagon, that's just a very fun fight. You have a technical striker, somebody who's good, off the southpaw, lead elbows, good in the clinch in Leon Edwards. And then you have one of the best pure boxers, I guess you can say, or pure strikers, not pure striker, but one of the best strikers in the UFC in Jorge Masvidal. It's just going to be a really, really fun matchup.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably the best matchup, the best route. I like the Gilbert Burns matchup too, but I think that's a really tough matchup for Masvidal. And Vicente Luque, stay away. It's too hot, too dangerous, and it's not much to gain. Not much to gain from him fighting him. So yeah, I would go. I would go in the same order as Johnathan.
You guys are crazy, man. Come on. Thank God none of you guys are managing George Masvidal, man. He's got to fight Nate Diaz.
Well, I haven't given my opinion yet.
Leon Edwards is going to smash him. Gilbert Burns would smash him. Vicente Luque would rip his head off his body in a choke and neck crank. I mean, no, man. George Masvidal, he's kind of got a Jake Paul thing going. You know what I mean? He's got this mystique. He's got to go knock somebody out. Nate Diaz is his opponent.
What gets him closer to a title shot, though? Nate Diaz
doesn't get him. Nobody
cares about title. He'll put the BMF on the line again. That's the real belt. He'll put that one on the line. No, honestly, Frank is right. Like, if I'm a UFC fighter anywhere between 155 and 185 pounds, I'm just calling out a Diaz brother, either one or both. Because that's the fight that makes it, or call out McGregor, of course. You got to call out McGregor or you got to call out a Diaz brother, because those are the three fights that make you the money. And
I mean, guys, I'm sorry, Alex, but maybe George drops down and fights back at 155. I wouldn't mind seeing that either. But
I wouldn't mind either. I mean, guys, I'm telling you right now, when is we're coming up to the Nick Diaz Robbie Lawler fight. If Nick doesn't win that fight, I may have to take a couple months off, because I've waited 6 years for this dude to come back from hiatus, retirement, whatever you want to call it. I've been waiting 6 years to watch Nick Diaz again. I thought he was robbed against Anderson Silva. If they just added a couple more rounds to the fight, he probably could have come through. And Anderson Silva, wasn't he doping? You know, I mean, it's just not even fair. And Nick Diaz actually was at a disadvantage because he was on the weed, which was probably slowing down his reaction time. Can you imagine if you can sober that dude up? I mean, he would be like Neo in the Matrix. Everything would be slow motion for that guy because he's used to moving in slow motion. When Nick Diaz beats Robbie Lawler, we're going to be doing 7 shows a week. I just hope you guys know, for a couple of months. But if he loses, I'm taking a couple of months off because I'm going to be so distraught. 6 years I have waited for the return. I need him to come through.
That's a long time for in between fights, man. I don't. Is there any record of a fighter taking MMA fighter taking 6 years off and coming back? Were they successful, unsuccessful? I can't think of it.
Not that I know of.
The longest absence that came back as a success, a huge success, was George St. Pierre, wasn't it? When he came back to beat Michael.
Yeah, and what was that? 2-3 years? 3 years, maybe.
3 years,
I believe.
Yeah,
but I mean, he's also facing Robbie Lawler at the tail end of his career. So, in my opinion, Robbie Lawler isn't the same fighter that he once was. And, he's been a little bit of kind of Tyron Woodley-esque where he's been really gun shy, right? Robbie Lawler isn't out there throwing like, we saw him early in his career. So I think it would be a good fight for Nick because this is a fight where he can come in. Maybe the first round he warms up into things and then he'll get it going later in the rounds. But I'm right there with you, man. CM Punk is returning this Sunday after 7 years gone, and if he loses,
don't get me started on that guy.
But
don't get me started. There's no more mystique. We like pro wrestling fans. They know the guy can't fight for real. So how can any wrestling fan take him seriously?
I mean, the spot is still fun.
Explaining that, Jonathan, explain that wrestling is an art form, and it's
but at least for a lot of those wrestlers, you have the illusion that maybe they could beat people up in real life.
It's called the suspension of disbelief.
Thank you. But with CM Punk has been exposed. The guy can't win a fight in real life.
Well, he can't win a fight against a UFC fighter. He'll sure kick my ass. I mean,
I don't know, man. You've been taking Muay Thai. I think you're right there. You're right there with him. We got to wrap it up on that note. I think Johnathan Ramlakhan could confidently beat up CM Punk. CM Punk's an old man. Like he's in his 40s. Very, very easy work for Johnathan. I want to give everyone a chance to let people know if you want to plug anything you're working on. Johnathan, I'll start with you because I know you love that pro wrestling. So tell CM Punk I said hello. Let people know the next time they can see you on the network.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be doing One Fall. That's going to be coming back hopefully this weekend. If not, we'll be back next week after the pay-per-view weekend this week. And you can follow me on Twitter at 3Piece Combo, that's spelled out, or on Instagram at 3PCMMA.
Frank, what about you? Any parting comments before we wrap?
Yeah, you're going to see me next week on this show, and then very soon you're going to see me training live with Dean Thomas at American Top Team. So we'll let you know when that's booked.
Good. What about you, James?
Yep. Twitter at James Walker NFL on Twitter, and also theathleticmentor.com. We are coming up with a new way, a more direct and personable way to help high school football players learn life skills as well as obtain athletic scholarships.
That is fantastic. I'm doing nothing that meaningful in my life right now, but you can follow me on Twitter. You can see the handle below, and you can watch. We're going to have another Donno Daily tomorrow at 12 noon to wrap up the week and get ready for Miami versus Alabama on Saturday. It's going to be a good one. All right. So for Johnathan, thank you so much for running the show tonight. For Frank and for James Walker, this has been another episode of 5 Rounds. We will talk to you guys again next week right here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.